Hey
I think we're
guys, it's Tiffany. Yep, here we are. It's Tiffany Bradley. Today's Art Off Pause features our guest, Dr. Kimberli Gant at the Chrysler Museum in Virginia. I'm going to give a quick intro to Kim's work, and then we'll talk a little bit and we'll take questions from you. So you can see there is a chat box to the side, so you can ask questions there. And there's also an ask a question functionality at the bottom. So I'm super, super excited to have Kim here. I've known her for over a decade. And let us know in the chat box if there's any issue with sound or video today. So Kimberli Gant, PhD, is the McKinnon Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art at the Chrysler Museum in Norfolk, Virginia. She was previously the Mellon Doctoral Fellow in the Arts of Global Africa at the Newark Museum, and she worked as the Director of Exhibitions at MoCADA in Brooklyn, which is where I met her. She's also guest curated for Deutsche Bank New York and the Department of African American Studies at UT Austin. Kimberli received her PhD in art history from UT Austin and also holds an MA and BA in art history. Super excited to have her. And I will say, Kimberli is one of my favorite curators, not just because she's awesome, but because but she has such a strong understanding of Black art, not just in the Americas, but in other contexts. So today she'll be talking about some curatorial work that she had to put on pause at the Chrysler, which includes performance from Brendon Fernandez and a reinstallation of Sam Gilliam's work. And Kim, I'm going to read from a book for a hot second. To line us up. So I had an opportunity to interview Brendon when he was up here for the Whitney Biennial last year. And his work is very influenced and responsive to ballet culture. And so as I thought about his work, I pulled up my handy book. Nobody talks about diverse dancers better than Brenda Dixon Gottchild. So this is just a quotation for all of us to think on. So she says, "The training has changed. The dancers have self-selected. For a long time, ballet languished, missing what people of color had to offer. The future of the institution, like the ballet body itself, will depend upon its flexibility." Over to you, Kim.
okay. Thank you for having me, Tiffany. This is really awesome. And just a wonderful chance to kind of discuss, like you said, art on pause in this current situation. And we opened Bodily Forms, art by Brendon Fernandez, back in January. It's kind of crazy to think that that's already happened already. We're in mid-April, late April at this point. And we've been having a really great response to that project, that exhibition prior to the museum closing. We are closed like most museums in the country. And Brendon and I had been discussing a project working together basically since I started at the museum. I actually got to speak on his work from actually a glass perspective at the Glass Art Society conference back in 2017, not too long after I started at the Chrysler. And I kind of presented work of contemporary artists who were using glass. They weren't specifically glass artists, which is kind of, I think, more of a niche kind of field, or people who want to really self-select in that way. And I knew Brendon had done some glass work. I'd seen it at the Monique Meloche Gallery back in Chicago, where I'm from. Woohoo, Chicago. And so because Chrysler is unique in that we have a very well-respected historic encyclopedic glass collection that's going from ancient to the contemporary, I thought it would be a really great way to kind of merge our contemporary kind of glass department area with the contemporary art department that I manage, and kind of really bridge that through a project with Brendon, and also a way to work on performance. We're one of the few museums in the country that has a working hot shop. So artists who work in glass can come and do guest projects there. We're also very known for
I have a
having
question.
Sure.
Why do you have a hot shop, and what exactly is a hot shop?
So because we have an encyclopedic glass collection, and because a lot of the community here is very interested in the creation of glass in many different forms, whether it's kind of blowing or creating neon or stamping, etching. I mean, there's so many ways to work with glass as a medium. And so we're celebrating now, upcoming, our 10th anniversary of the Glass Studio. So that opened prior to the museum. So it's a way to actually have artists create there in glass. We also have a very established assistantship program. So artists who want to work in glass more exclusively, want to get a lot more training, they will come and do 6 months to a year of working with our director of that department and the studio managers who run that space. They do free live demonstrations every day, I think Tuesday through Sunday. And like I said, we bring in international, national artists known for glass to do projects there, as well as do third Thursday performances. So every third Thursday, we combine the creation of glass making with a performance piece. So that, again, had already been established prior to me coming, and I was trying to find ways to bring in the contemporary department into that area, since we have a curator of glass, I'm the curator of contemporary. How can we kind of merge that and make those bridges? And I thought Brendon would be a perfect example. I brought in an artist previous, Michael Menchaca, who had a work in our project space. He had not worked with glass before, and so he actually worked with our glass department to create a whole performance piece with that. So I've been trying to continue that momentum by working with Brendon.
And so what happened when coronavirus hit and you guys had to rethink everything?
So at this moment, the exhibition is very safely, all the work is still safely in the building and protected. I just want to put that out there. And I think, like everyone, have tried to really shift things online. So Brendon and the gallery gave us permission to show the video work on the website. So the exhibition consists of 3 pieces. There are 2 video works and a glass piece. So we've got the video work. We had already had images that Brendon and the gallery had graciously sent to us. So that's on the website. Our photographer, as he can, given the limitations, is trying to still do installation shots in situ, so that can also be put online. And we're trying to shift the performance for the third Thursday that originally had been planned for May to July. So we're in the process of working that out at the moment so that it can still happen, because I think it would be just a really wonderful opportunity to still show the real kind of physical and experiential impact of Brendon's work.
And what, in the best case scenario, assuming that we're able to reprogram and we're all able to come down to Norfolk and visit, what would we see in that performance?
So he's actually still working on that. So it's going to be a bit of a surprise.
Okay.
Which I think is going to be great. I mean, I think people will see what they expect of Brendon, in the sense of it's going to be visually stunning. It's going to be, it'll make you think. It'll make you also really think of the space that it's in. Brendon really, I think, does a great job of figuring out the architecture of the space that he's working with and trying to create the work within that space. And so Brendon had actually come back in January and did a small talk and did some conversations with our docents, but he was able to actually see one of our Third Thursday performances. So it really gave him an understanding of what we can do. And I think that also shifted some of his thinking of, oh, I thought it was going to be like this. Then he saw it and goes, oh, this can be much more kind of spectacle than I think he expected. So I am excited to really see what that's going to look like.
Okay. And so we have
There'll be glass.
There'll be
some
glass
in there.
Yeah. I hear you are a historical expert on glass in your institution. I hear there's a lot of glass. Anyway.
There's a lot of glass. I'm
there's
not
a lot of glass.
I would definitely not call myself the, no, we have a Carrie Nadal Swan, who's PhD, who's an archaeologist, is definitely the knowledge. She's the curator of glass.
Okay.
But I have learned
Yep.
from her and our previous curator. So I've definitely learned some things.
So you also have a Sam Gilliam installation that is up. Is it still up?
Yes, it's still up. That's going to be up for a nice amount of time because it definitely took a bit of maneuvering to get it up there. It is actually reinstalling a work from our permanent collection, Norfolk Keels, which was commissioned in the early 90s, I believe 92. And the previous director worked with Sam Gilliam to create this, to kind of make this commission happen. And so when you kind of come into the foyer of the building, you look up, our entire foyer, our entire top of the foyer is skylit. So it really draws your eye up because it is these incredible, beautiful swaths of long cloth. So for people who know Sam Gilliam's work and they know his drape paintings, imagine that, but seeing it as opposed to seeing it from a frontal point of view, you're seeing it from an above point of view. So you can see these different drapes of fabric overlapping each other. You can see that there's colors atop and bottom, and it's just an incredible, just visual scene. And we're very, very thrilled to have that back on view.
So I have two questions about that. One is a nerdy question, and then one is a general question. So the nerdy question is, if you have a piece of fabric art under like direct light, is like, are you worried about if it's color fast or if it's going to get damaged? So that's the super nerdy question. And the more general question is, if folks don't know Sam Gilliam's work, can you give a little bit of background about who he is and why it's exciting to rehang this?
Sure. So to answer the nerdy question first, we have a on-site conservator who was definitely, the piece was reviewed, and it had been up for, I think, about a decade. Over 5 years ago was when it was taken down, when the museum actually closed for a massive renovation. And so we had it looked at and kind of reviewed to make sure that everything was good. And so, I mean, we definitely take into consideration those ideas of, light levels and how we want to make sure that our objects are given the best care. So the work will be out for a finite amount of time, but it has held up beautifully. And so we're not concerned that it's going to fade quickly, given that its current condition is very, very good. So it'll be up for a finite amount of time, then it will go off view and kind of go into a nice dark space so that we kind of continue to make sure that we limit any sort of issues or fading over time, because that is a major mandate of the institution. And to talk about William, so he's a major DC artist, a very well-established African-American artist who's a painter. He's known more for his drape paintings that he's been doing for the last several decades, which really kind of, I think, showed the difference in terms of how his work is compared to others. in regards to, he took the canvas kind of off the frame, off the wall. And so if you kind of think of how drapes may hang kind of on a window, they're kind of just, you know, very beautifully kind of folded, reach the floor. But imagine that kind of beautiful arc, but kind of the wave effect. And those are painted, and they kind of drape over it, and then they kind of make this kind of beautiful sculpture as well as a painting. But he's also, I mean, prior to that, he's part of the, you know, considered part of Washington. He's Washington color-filled artist from DC from the late 70s, 60s. He also did a lot of hard edge abstraction work previous to that. One of our collectors has some slightly earlier Sam Gilliam work. So he's known for the drape paintings, but his practice was much more expansive than that. But we are thrilled to have such kind of, I think, a monumental public piece in our collection that was made specifically for that space.
That's great. I'm going to open up question and answer time. Maybe I'll unfocus the screen, trying it out. But so internet friends, you can ask questions in the chat box, or you can ask a question underneath where it says ask a question. Please do. We're here to talk. I can talk all day. Kim can talk all day, but you know, y'all might have
all
things to say. All the talking. But I think one question I have is, so you're in Virginia, you have this great Sam Gilliam, and when we think about sort of that part of the world, it's not like DC is here and Virginia is here. We think of Delmarva and like the Delmarva sort of location being Delaware, Maryland, Virginia.
That took me a second. I was like, Delmarva.
Delmarva. As sort of like
the DMV. The DMV, they say.
Its own part of Black American culture. And so how has it been living and curating in that part of the country, as opposed to being in Brooklyn at MoCADA, which was, you know, its own vibe, and Newark, you know, right? And then you're a Chicago native. So how do you feel like working in these different Black communities feels different?
So I think it's a different sort of, I don't want to say it's a different sort of energy. I think it's given a different perspective on how to think about curating and thinking about art. So, you know, living in New York, basically on and off for 10 years, there's kind of this built-in network of just people who know artists and they want to come to your shows and they want to see the things. And so there's this kind of already just established audience, I think. And so here, I think there's more about introducing artists that maybe you and I go like, oh, of course, like all these names. And for a lot of people here, that's very new to them. So, and now also working, and what's also really different is this is my second experience working at an encyclopedic institution. So Newark gave me my first exposure to that, which was absolutely amazing. But again, there was a built-in audience, if not in Newark, but in the kind of the New York area. And so we are in 3 hours minimal, depending on how fast you drive from DC, about 90 to 2 hours from Richmond. And so and the number one employer here is the military. So there's not necessarily a community that's just, oh yeah, we're going to come and look at art all the time. There are people who are very interested in the arts, and and whether it's visual or performance or theatrical or any of those things. But what I've tried to do is really utilize our collection, because it is an incredible strength of the Chrysler. We have an incredible collection in an area where I think people may not expect it. And so utilizing that and kind of really doing an assessment here, I've tried to kind of say, hey, where are some areas both in terms of medium, in terms of time period, in terms of artists, that I can kind of push us further in some new directions. And so thinking about artists who really fit within what we're already doing. So like I said, we have this glass selection. So that's why I brought in Brendon. We have a performance, through glass, but how can I bring in artists who aren't necessarily glass people, but they do performance work and kind of bridge that. We have a project space that we do a lot of film and video, Let's start bringing in more international artists that way. So utilizing the options and opportunities that are already existing within the institution and trying to make it more expansive, and kind of trying to bring the world here, but also on top of that, looking very inward, looking at what's happening locally and regionally, because I do think that there is this, maybe there's a perception that because it's not, New York, LA, Chicago, it's not like a major city area, that you have to go elsewhere to find the arts. And I think that there's incredible artists here in this region that need more presentations, that need more exposure, not just to our own community, but to the kind of those major cities as well. So I think I'm trying to do that kind of juxtaposition between the two.
Great. And Eric, hi, Eric, who's one of my production team members right now in Minneapolis, is asking a question, which is, how is Brendon taking in this historical moment as the person who's curating this show? Have you had any correspondence with him and the other artists about what the creative process is like in this moment?
Brendon and I have kind of done some more responding on his IG stories. We haven't had a direct kind of conversation on, how, but I mean, from what I'm seeing, he's cooking a lot. He's keeping up with his friends. I think he's doing, he's working and thinking and just using this time as an opportunity for kind of creative flow. And, maybe because I know, at least from my perception, he's been doing a lot. I mean, he's been traveling an incredible amount, doing these incredible shows all over the world. So I think this is also a moment where you can kind of just take a step back and think about, okay, where do I really want some of my projects to move into and move forward with? And so that's what I've kind of been seeing. And I've more, it's been weird because even though it's art off pause, I'm not off pause. So I've been doing more research. So I haven't talked to as many artists as I should have, and I do need to kind of reach out. But I think we're all just trying to adjust to the new normal. And with my artist friends, both makers and curators, we're just trying to kind of figure out what our daily balance is. You've got those with kids, without kids. So I think everyone is just trying to kind of figure out, all right, what can I do? What can I make, to show that I am working, I am doing things, but also that I am also taking this time to reflect and kind of see what's important and kind of making adjustments that way.
So that's a great sort of lead into our last question, which is, what are you hoping for the future? And what would you like to change for the better after this crisis?
I think what I hope for the future is that we, just on kind of just a larger, broader, umbrella moment, is I hope we really think of each other, we remember we're all human, and that I hope we remember our humanity more, and that we realize how precarious life can be that precarious life can be, given that we're kind of in this capitalist system. And so that we need to think about we just need to think about each other more and how we can kind of help each other more, even just on small bases. I also hope that people realize how important the arts are. I think if anything, I mean, I know there was a kind of a great meme or post that was getting sent around about Patrick Stewart, reading from a book. And that's literature. And you've got people like DJ Nice who are doing these stay-at-home dance events, and you've got people doing concerts from their home and performances from their home. And this is the arts. Like this, as much as these things are getting cut off, this is what's keeping us sane nowadays. And we're using our digital platforms more, but there's no shift from from the experience, from the live experience. And we're doing the best that we can, but I think that what I just really hope is that we remember that everyone has struggles, and we just need to remember that when you're having a bad day or you're upset or whatnot, like, everyone has those. So just take a breath, and you're upset or unhappy, but everyone is going through this, and there's many people more worse off than I am. I am thrilled that my institution it has employed me, and that I can work from home, and I have that luxury and privilege. And but that within that, the arts are not prioritized enough as they should be. And I hope that this situation shows how important they are.
Okay, and we actually have two questions. Now the questions are rolling in. So one is from Lindsay, who is Kim's sister. Hey, Lindsay. Which is there a historical context of glassmaking in Norfolk? And then just to line up the second question from Shilpi, are there projects you're working on personally during quarantine?
Sure. So there's not necessarily like a history of like glass production in the sense of there were factories or things here, as far as I'm aware. But I do think you had artists working in glass for many decades, and so there's been this artistic community of glass makers, and so that's kind of where that came from. The museum's point of view, Walter P. Chrysler, whose collection was donated to kind of create the institution, he had a strong fascination with glass and had been collecting encyclopedically because he'd wanted to found his own museum. So I think that also really helped build an interest in the medium as an artistic form locally. So it was a combination of the two, kind of seeing that there was this incredible legacy to glass, not just from purely functional, but also from an artistic point of view, and then the collection really reaffirming that. And then the second thing I'm working on, quarantine. So in terms of exhibition projects, there's two major projects I'm working on, which are I'm working on an essay. My colleague Seth Beeman, who's our Deputy Director of Arts and Interpretation, Curator of Photography, is co-curating an exhibition on Alma Thomas, which will be a really important, large retrospective of the artist's work from like her early days into her latter period of her more famous kind of abstract paintings. So I'm working on an essay on that. And then a personal exhibition I'm working on, I'm co-curating with Ndubuisi Ezulumba, who's the curator of African art at New Orleans Museum of Art. We are working on an exhibition of Jacob Lawrence and the artist of Mbari from Nigeria. So really trying to kind of show, there was a publication that came out of Nigeria between 57 and 67, 75 really, called Black Orpheus, which was this arts and culture publication that was really trying to show kind of drama, literature, visual arts, performance coming out of the global South and or artists of color in the US. And so Jacob Lawrence actually created a whole series of work in Nigeria that has not really received much attention. And so that's a big traveling exhibition that he and I are working on to kind of show all of these different international artists from the African continent and from the global South, even some in Europe, who were presented in this publication, including some African American artists as well.
Excellent.
I'm working on and then separately I'm gardening.
Okay. Which is really good.
Yeah, doing some little balcony gardening.
So we're at half an hour. So we're going to wrap up. I'll do some housekeeping, which is first and best. Thank you, Kim, for all of your insights and for coming today. Tomorrow we'll have Betty Yu, who is, thank you, Lindsay, you're fantastic too. We'll have Betty Yu, who's based in New York, who's a curator, activist, filmmaker, educator, everything. She's going to be great. And same time, same place, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Tiffany.